All right, guys, today we are talking about how the universe actually works and a formula that is going to allow you to create and be the deliberate creator of your life so that you're living more of the life that you want to live. And that's what this channel is all about. It's not just about theory. It's not just about philosophies that sound good and maybe pointing towards truth. That's great. But how can we use that could be considered something that's more nebulous, more out there, and bring it back down into our lives in practical ways? And so today I'm going to be showing you a formula and some ideas that you can put into practical use to actually start creating the life you want for yourself. We're actually going to be going over how the universe, and more specifically your universe, actually works from the side of creation, and how you can do certain things, become aware of certain things, so that you can deliberately create what you want. So we're going to talk about a few different things here, give you some practical tools, and the first thing I want to talk to you about is something called the observer effect. Now, this is huge, because this is going to show you so much of how you actually create. It's also going to go over how the universe actually works. You have to understand that there is more to life than this physical world. There is also a non-physical part of reality. And what if I was to tell you that actually the non-physical, the thing that you cannot see with your five senses, so you can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't hear it, see it, all these different stuff, right? That's of the physical. All of these things in the non-physical actually make up what we can consider 99.9999, see if I can fit it, 9% of reality. Reality is literally 99.999999% non-physical. And we're going to go over why this is important, but you need to understand this before we move on. And so if reality and this universe, this construct, this greater consciousness system is 99.999999% non-physical, we could also call this empty space, or we could also call it energy. I'm sure you've heard the idea that everything is energy. It's absolutely true. Even the physical, so the non-physical is 99.9, but what makes up this 0.00001% of reality is what we call the physical. And this is so crucial to understand, and I'll get to why the observer effect plays into this, but 0.00001% of this reality, of this thing we live in, of the universe, is actually physical, with the vast majority of it, I mean, to a statistically negligible point. This is statistically basically negligible. That doesn't mean it's not big to us. It doesn't mean we should dismiss it, which we're going to get into. But this is how it operates. And so this 99.99999% is what creates this percentage, meaning everything within the physical is coming from the non-physical. The physical is a subset of the superset, which is non-physical. So the way you can think about that is, if this is the physical, this box right here, and we'll say, if you can see that, that's P for physical. It comes from something much larger, which we can consider non-physical. This is not the scale. But ultimately, this is what gives birth to this. This 99.999999% of reality gives birth to the 0.00001% that is physical matter reality. And so if you're coming from the paradigm and operating from the belief that we live in a physical universe, of course you're not going to be able to create intentionally, because you're leaving 99.9+% on the table, unused, disregarded, and you have it backwards. This came first. This is first, which leads to the physical. The physical is born out of what you are doing in the non-physical. This is, in a nutshell, how the universe works. Now, let's tie into what I said was the observer effect into what we just talked about. And then we'll move into how you can actually use this in your life. You see, the observer effect is a very interesting phenomenon that I believe was first discovered by Thomas Young in 1801. He is the one accredited to doing the first double slit experiment. And then later there were other experiments done. He may have not actually coined the observer effect. It may have been discovered later, but he essentially came up with the experiment that would lead to us understanding the observer effect. And the observer effect is an incredible discovery because what it actually showed us is that a conscious observer can take what's in the non-physical and essentially collapse it into the physical. That means it takes what's in this non-physical part of our reality, what makes up most of it, this energy, this empty space, this vibration, these frequencies, and can collapse what's called the wave function, and you can just think of that as energy, you can think of that as non-physical, into the physical, right? So it collapses it into the physical through the observer effect, a conscious observer. And the double slit experiment showed that when you did not have an observer observing the experiment, and essentially the experiment was they would shoot these photons, which is just a tiny particle of light, like really base particle of light, through these double slits that they had, and it would create a pattern on the wall, and they would record what this is. They found that when they observed it, it made a very predictable pattern. And it made basically this particle pattern. I don't know the exact term. But when they didn't observe it, but then they went back to look at what happened, it actually formed what's called a wave function. And they finally figured out after enough time that it was through a conscious observer that it actually changed the results. And again, these photons, these subatomic particles essentially that they're shooting through these double slits are what make up our physical reality. And so what this showed us in a nutshell is that how you observe the world, how you look at things, determines what shows up in your life because you are creating and building things based on how you observe them. Now again, there's much more advanced things we could go into when it comes to this, but just to understand that your observation has a very powerful effect. Now here is a trap not to fall into. If you think I'm talking about observation just through your physical eyes, then you haven't been paying attention to what I've said here, because that would be the 0.00001% part of you. We are not just talking about observation in the sense of what you are physically seeing. We are talking about your non-physical observation, the energy that you dwell in, the thoughts that you are having in the inner world, the things that you are imaging and visualizing and giving energy to in that inner world. What are you observing in that realm? And it goes a long way to creating the reality you want for yourself. And this is where we get into this idea of the three-part, and that word here is being. And this is where we start to tie this together. And so now we know, again, and when you look into this, that the way our universe works is it's mainly non-physical. The non-physical gives birth to the physical, and it gives birth to the physical through what we call the observer effect, especially when it comes to us. You are a conscious observer. So the non-physical gives birth to the physical. It comes from that, not the other way around. This is the 99.99999% of what this all is, of this reality. It doesn't mean neglect this, but that's just how it is. This is the large chunk of what's out there, and then it creates this smaller subset that we know as the physical, and a big way in which we do that is through the observer effect, and I'm going to show you how to use this to your advantage to start creating the life that you want. But one thing to understand is you are what's called a three-part being. So to illustrate this, you can think of it like a triangle, and we'll just say they have equal sides. So if my drawing doesn't show that, just assume they have they have three sides. So this is you. This triangle represents you. It represents all of us. And on the one side, you have the physical part of you. Now, I think all of you can get behind this idea that you have a physical body, right? You have a physical body, you exist in a physical world. We are not saying this doesn't exist, like some people will like to say, or it's an illusion. Now, it might be considered an illusion under certain conditions and certain definitions. And it certainly is illusory when compared to the non-physical, but it's still something you operate in and is here for a reason. So to call it an illusion in the sense of it doesn't matter is, I think, a little bit counterintuitive and doesn't really serve us. We want to learn how to actually thrive in the physical alongside the other sides of us. But you are not just physical. Again, this is that 0.0000001% part of you. So what about the rest of this? What is the part of you that connects to that 99.9+%? Well, there's two other sides of you. There's what we call the mental side of your existence. And this is easy to think about. These are your thoughts. You know, we could put thoughts here. This is your imaging, visualizations. This is the thought realm, right? But there's one other side of you that many of us forget and a lot of people don't believe exists or don't tune into, and this is spirit. And so you are a three-part being with all of these influencing each other. All of them playing into each other through what's called correspondence. But if you are only focusing on this, again, you are only accessing that tiny percentage of you, where these two right here is accessing the 99.9+%. That once again is what most of reality is made up of. And so if we want to influence our lives, if we want to create intentionally, should we be only focusing here in that part of you that makes up that tiny percentage of what makes up reality? Or should we start giving more attention using the observer effect that is a proven thing now? Should we be using this more and giving more emphasis to the 99.9+% of you that is made up of the mental and spiritual? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think and what I found has worked. But when you start dwelling and observing things differently from the spiritual and mental, and you start prioritizing that, what's going to happen is you activate certain things on the spiritual, certain things in the mental, which create effects on the physical. This is also known as the law of attraction, the law of balance, that through thinking a certain way, feeling a certain way, there has to be a correspondence that happens on the physical and certain effects that happen. For example, if on the spiritual and mental, so spiritual plus mental, you're in what's called fear all the time, on these two planes of existence, you're always in fear. Well, what's going to happen in the physical? You're also going to have the physical equivalent of fear that corresponds with these two planes of existence. You are activating the 99.9+% that makes up reality from a fear-based energy and fear-based thoughts. And so you can get nothing other than fear in the physical, because again, the non-physical leads to the physical. You will never find someone who is acting in a spiritual and mental way in fear that then has love and joy or abundance in the physical and has a smooth, we'll say, existence, a happy existence, a growth-oriented existence. But on the same thought or in the same way, you will never find someone who spiritually and mentally is balanced and is in joy and in gratitude and abundance, who doesn't also have that in the physical or isn't currently moving in that direction in the physical, right? And so understand the way this works. This is our reality. 99.9+% empty space energy. Tiny percentage physical. The non-physical leads to the physical. One of the ways in which that happens is the observer effect, right? What are you observing in the spiritual and mental planes of your existence? Not what are you observing in the physical. The physical is the outpouring, is the end result, is the byproduct of what you have been observing and entertaining on the spiritual and mental. And then you will be compelled to take certain actions, to make certain choices, to move in certain ways. Sorry for my terrible handwriting, but then you will be compelled, when these are lined up in a certain way, to do certain things in the physical to complete the cycle, to complete the creation process. All right, so there's some more things we're going to go over, but we need to clean up this board first, so let's magically clean it. Whoa, okay, time to invest in a new whiteboard because that's not as clean as I'd hoped it'd be. But guys, let's expand on this a little bit, because what does this matter And how is it we can use this to start creating deliberately? How does understanding that this is how our universe works help us? So that's what we want to go over next. So again, I'll keep some things up here so you can remember them. Remember, you're a three-part being. Reality is 99.9. We'll just do plus %. Observer effect. Again, you are always observing something. Always. We can also call this infinite action. What this means is whatever you are dwelling in when it comes to these three planes of existence is always sending out a signal. You can't turn this off. You are a creator. You are creative. You are a conscious being that is always sending out a signature that is made up of these three planes of existence that make you up. But keep in mind, the 99.99%, that part that makes up most of reality, is connected to through the spirit and the mental, mainly. Okay, so this is how the universe works in a nutshell. Again, we could go deeper. We could get into some other laws and principles, but this is enough to start working with in order to start changing your life and moving in the way that you want and to start creating in the ways that you want, right? So now we have this understanding. Or at least you have the option to be open to this understanding if you want to take it on board. So how can we start using this to better our lives, to affect our lives in ways that benefit us? Well, this is when we really need to pay attention to the observer effect. And what energy, and we can also call energy emotion, or if we break up emotion, energy in motion. So what energy, emotion, and thoughts are you activating more often? Are you activating? This is a question to ask yourself. What energy, again, what emotions, what are you feeling? Are you in things like anger and guilt and shame and these kinds of emotions a lot, pride and jealousy? Or are you in emotions like courage and excitement and peace and joy and love most of the time? That's what we're talking about here, energy in motion. The spiritual is your connection to source and the divine. And the higher you are on the consciousness scale, the better you feel, the more you are connected to that which you come from and that which you are, which also makes up that 99.9+%. And so the better you feel, the better this realm is going to be for you and the more your life is going to improve. So what energy, emotion, and thoughts, the mental plane. And when we say thoughts, we're not just saying what you think in like words. We're talking about what are you picturing? What are you imaging? What are you visualizing? If you stop and take a look to observe your thoughts, you'll notice that you're usually picturing something. Maybe you're remembering something and you're seeing it in images or whatever else. What are you thinking about most of the time? Most people have no idea. They're unconscious. They're sleeping awake. They have no idea what they're thinking about, so they have no idea what they're using the observer effect towards. They have no idea what they're creating from that 99.9+%. So what energy, emotion, and thoughts are you activating from the three parts of yourself more often than not? Whatever you are doing here, and we can call these causes, will lead to results in the physical. And what do we call these? We call these effects. So what energy, emotion, and thoughts are you activating on the spiritual and mental planes? Because whatever you have been dwelling in these two planes of existence will lead to the results in the physical or the effects. This is cause and effect at a higher level. Most people are used to what cause and effect is at just the physical level. Just the physical, right? You know, billiard balls kind of running into each other and one hits it in this way, it creates this effect where it goes in this way. A lot of Isaac Newton's laws, right? They are played in the physical. But when we get to the quantum, cause and effect is still being activated beyond the physical, in the non-physical. Remember, the physical came from the non-physical. So there are going to be similar laws that we see here in the non-physical. And this is how cause and effect works. What causes are you creating in the spiritual and mental planes? It's going to create certain effects in the physical. And this works for every single person. Meaning, again, you cannot create certain causes or activate certain causes in the spiritual and mental and not have very specific effects, as in similar energy, similar ideas, similar frequencies come in to the physical. Meaning, if on the spiritual and mental, for example, you are allowing yourself to feel abundance, you're experiencing it emotionally now, regardless of what's happening in the physical. Remember, physical comes from the non-physical, right? And you're having thoughts about you in abundance and it feels good, you're feeling good about it, then in the physical, there will have to be opportunities, people, and events that allow you to experience the effects of that in the physical realm. This is creation at a higher level. Will you have to take action? Absolutely. You then have to move to complete that creation process. But that is what is going to occur. Now, one last thing I want to leave you off with is a really powerful idea on one way to think about all of this. Remembering that the spiritual and mental is energy, frequency, vibration. Thought vibrates a little slower than energy, but not by much. They're on the same pole. Actually, all of it's on the same pole. Again, everything's of a like kind. Remember, at the end of the day, all of this is spirit, all of this is energy, but they exist on this pole. And you could say physical is down here. Spirit or energy is here. Mind would be somewhere in here. And this is all the same thing. They're of a like kind, but to different degrees of vibration. The slower the vibration, the more dense is when you're getting to physical. The higher the vibration, the faster the vibration is when you're getting to spirit energy, meaning things happen quickly on the spiritual and mental planes of existence. If I ask you or tell you, think of a pink elephant, you're going to be able to think of it within a second. It's going to take a lot longer to manifest that on the physical, right? So it is a slower rate of vibration, which is why things do not come into the physical right when you think about them or right when you feel about them. You have to dwell in it long enough to create new effects, because the physical, and hopefully this will click now that we've gone over all of this, the physical equals, and this is simply what the physical is. It's a simple way of putting it. The physical is your energetic history. That's it. All of this around you is just a history of what you have been dwelling in the spiritual and mental, in that 99.999 plus percent of what makes up reality. Whatever you have been activating, whatever you have been observing means dwelling in, entertaining, giving your attention to, whatever you have been doing in the inner world, we could call it, which is made up of these two, the outer world made up of the physical, whatever you have been dwelling in your inner world, will create an energetic history. Why is it a history? Because physical takes longer. It is a denser rate of vibration. This is a quicker, lighter rate of vibration. And when you get really high, it's instantaneous. Again, you can think of a pink elephant. You can think of your favorite car right now. You can think of someone you love. You could also access that emotion of love just by thinking about something right away. It takes longer to get in the physical because it is a history. And so how do you use this to your advantage? Create a new history. How do you create a new history? What are you observing? What are you dwelling in the spiritual and mental planes of existence? Are you then taking the inspired action that will come into the physical? I promise you, absolutely promise you, that if you do this, and you do it properly, because this is law, this is principle, in the same way that if I go outside and I throw this pen off of my balcony, are you going to bet against it falling to the ground? Absolutely not. You're not going to, because you know on the physical plane, in this form, gravity is in operation, this will fall. Right? You would be really silly to bet against that in this plane of existence. It is that precise when it comes to the laws operating on the spiritual and mental plane as well. I know this will work because it is exactly the same. It is mathematical. It is finely tuned. And if you dwell and use the observer effect, which is your ability, which is your power as a conscious observer, to observe differently on the spiritual and mental planes of existence, you have to, by law, create a new energetic history. And to make it even more precise, you will create opportunities to create a new energetic history. Again, if you think things and feel things, but then don't act upon them when the time comes, then nothing's going to manifest. That's a part of your co-creative process. However, when you observe certain things in the mental and spiritual, things will start lining up for you. Things will start changing. I guarantee it, because this is law. It has to occur. So guys, this is a lot to take in. We're going to have a lot more videos like this. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy this style. I love doing these deep dive videos that go over how this all works. And if you want more ideas on how to make this work, more exercises, more things that are going to help you with this, you got to let me know down below. But until next time, remember, you are a deliberate, conscious creator. You are powerful. You can activate the observer effect and create any energetic history that you want for yourself. But you got to choose to do it, and you got to start activating the spiritual and mental planes of existence that are a part of you to create new effects in your physical, if that's what you want. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments what you liked, what resonated with you, and everything else. And I'll see you next time.